I don't know if you're one of those people that's took this season as an opportunity to review your life and to review your priorities. Whether you're one of those people that's starting to look ahead and think, actually, I want to live in a slightly different way. Maybe you're somebody who wants to live with a bit more purpose and a bit more meaning as you look forward. If you are one of those people, then we've got a great tool, a great practical prayer for you today. It's a simple one-line prayer that you can pray, and we're going to invite you to pray it for the next week. And it's got the capacity to really change your life. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. It's got the ability to fill your life with purpose and with meaning in incredible ways. It's a dangerous prayer, though. It's part of a series. If you've been around the last couple of sessions, you'll know that we're on a series called Dangerous Prayers, where we take a one-line prayer from the Bible and we pray it for the week. And so our first prayer was Make Me Bold, and last week we had Speak to Me, and the one-line prayer today is possibly the most dangerous of the lot. It's a prayer that will bring frustration to your life. So if you're sitting there thinking, you know, I could just do with a bit more frustration in your life, then this prayer is going to be fantastic for you. It's also a prayer that's going to bring discomfort into your life. So if you're feeling, you know, I could do with a bit more discomfort, then stick around and grab this prayer and use it. And probably if you pray this prayer, it's going to bring pain into your life. So if you're thinking, well, I don't just want discomfort and I don't just want frustration, I'd love a bit more pain in your life, then stick around, get involved with this prayer, because it's going to be a great resource and a great help for you. Now, you might be thinking, well, why in the world would I do that? Why in the world would I take a prayer that might bring me discomfort, that might bring me frustration, and might bring me pain? Why would I pray that prayer? You know, a number of people are getting involved with church online and praying in this season who don't normally do it. And typically people get involved with prayer and they get involved with God and faith because they want to get rid of those things from their life. And you might be one of those people. You're thinking, well, I'm trying to get rid of discomfort and I want to get rid of pain and I want to get rid of frustrations. That's why I'm looking at this God thing. Well, stick around and we're going to kind of explain how this works. So we're going to invite you for the next week to pray this prayer. God, break my heart. God, break my heart. Take my heart and strip it of selfishness and comfort and ease and weigh it down with the things that concern you. Now you might be thinking, well, why in the world would I pray that prayer? Why would I pray, God, break my heart? If it might bring frustration and it might bring discomfort and it might bring pain in my life. You know, we're finding a number of people who don't normally go to church or don't normally explore faith and prayer are turning to it in this season. And you may be one of those people and you'll be thinking, well, I'm turning to prayer and I'm turning to God and I'm watching church online to get rid of those things in my life, to get rid of discomfort and to get rid of frustration, to get rid of pain. And now you're suggesting I pray a prayer, God break my heart, that's going to bring those things in my life. Why would I do that? As strange as it seems, I think that this really is going to be a brilliant prayer for you to take and pray this week. And the reason I think it's so brilliant and the reason I'm suggesting you do this kind of crazy thing is because human beings, you may have discovered this in your own life, human beings are brilliant at not knowing what's best for them. Human beings are brilliant at getting involved with things that actually don't bring them what they need and what they want. I mean, as crazy as it is, we imagine that we're designed for comfort, for example. We think that actually if we just get more comfort and get rid of anything that stops comfort, then we'll be happy and we'll be fulfilled. We'll feel that things are just fantastic. I mean, if you were given the option between comfort or discomfort, it seems obvious, doesn't it? Or if you're given the option between ease or frustration, it seems obvious what we would choose. Or if you were choosing between pleasure or pain, then, you know, comfort wins every time, does it not? Isn't it obvious what we should choose? But what happens if it's not obvious what's best for us? That on the face of it, something like just being as comfortable as possible is the best. But what happens if it's not? And actually, probably in your own experience, you might have discovered this. Let me give you an example of what some people are discovering this season. So I know this isn't the case for everybody, but for some people, they're in an experience where they've got a bit more space and a bit more time in their life. Maybe you're not commuting to work, or maybe you're on furlough and so you've got more time at home. Maybe you can't go out to evening events and meetings and you're at home and there's just be a bit more space. And then what people are doing is turning to things that provide comfort to them. A lot of people are Netflix binging or watching iPlayer or other things, then sitting around drinking and eating to their heart's content. And in a sense, it's all the comfort you could want. Just sit there, watch Netflix, just eat and just be really comfortable. But what people find is that actually that's not leading to life. That rather than feel happier and more fulfilled, actually the opposite is happening in some ways. That maybe people are finding that they're not designed for comfort, that there's something bigger that they're supposed to be there for. And they're just getting comfort all the time isn't the best. I mean, I was on a Zoom call this week with 5 other church leaders. And as we were chatting, you know, if you lead a church, if that's a job, you're often out at evening meetings, you're very busy. And some of that has been stripped away. I know some of us are very active online, but there's a bit more space in the evenings. So you would think that all the church leaders would be thriving and surviving. But in this meeting of 5, it was clearly 2 were deeply struggling. You know, they were really struggling. They would wake up on a morning, they would struggle to get out of bed. They would just feel pretty terrible some of the times. They'd be turning to maybe unhealthy habits, even though on the face of it, they've got loads of comfort all around them. And what happens if actually we're not designed for comfort? What happens if having lives full of comfort and convenience and ease actually makes our lives smaller and shrivels our soul, as it were? What happens if our soul was meant for something bigger, was meant for God, in fact, was meant for God and his purposes? Well, our prayer, God break my heart, is a chance to invite God to break into our heart and our lives, to remove the sense of self-centeredness, to remove obsession with ease and comfort and convenience, and actually to weigh us down with the things of God, for the things that bother him to bother us deeply and to kind of disturb us and to stir it up. And a great example of this is Jeremiah. Jeremiah was a messenger of God in the Old Testament, a prophet, and God called him up to speak out his message. And as he did that, he saw, you know, the community and the people of God, they turned from God, they turned to other things, and therefore the way that they lived wasn't pleasing to God. They would oppress the poor, they would live in selfish ways, society would start to disintegrate in all sorts of ways. And you found that Jeremiah's heart was deeply moved by everything that he saw. He was deeply disturbed. I mean, just listen to this reading. Cecily's going to read us a prayer, something that Jeremiah said, from Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 18 through to 21. And just listen to Jeremiah's heart through these words.
Verse 18. O my comforter in sorrow, my heart is faint within me. Listen to the cry of my people from a land far away. Is the Lord not in Zion? Is her king no longer here? Why have they provoked me to anger with their images, with their worthless foreign idols? The harvest is past, the summer has ended, and we are not saved. Since my people are crushed, I am crushed. I mourn, and horror grips me.
Do you want that? Listen to these words for a minute. It says, my grief is beyond healing. My heart is broken. I hurt with the hurt of my people. I mourn and I'm overcome with grief. Do you want that? You know, sometimes I don't want that. You know, I wake up in the morning and I just want comfort. I want it to be an easy day. I want nothing to go wrong with the car and in the house. The people I interact with, you know, I just want it to go straight forward with them. In brackets, they agree with me, and just everything to be easy. But when life's too easy and it's just filled with comfort and our own convenience, what we find, you know, that's okay for some days, but over the long term, we will find that we will shrivel. Our soul will shrivel and our life will shrivel and it become smaller and smaller. And that's how this dangerous prayer can be so powerful. Lord, break my heart. It's so powerful to have God break into our lives in that way. And can lead us to having a life just filled with purpose and meaning and living a disturbed life. I mean, when I was 19, I'd become a Christian around about that time and become really serious about my faith. And I remember me and a friend, we ended up on this conference in London. We were living in Edinburgh at the time, and it was a weekend conference, and it was a church planting conference. Now, it's a funny term, church planting, but it means starting a church from scratch. So this conference was all about starting a church from scratch. Now, when you start a new church or a church from scratch, then typically what you do is you do that as a church for non-church people. You start a new thing because you're trying to reach a new audience, as it were. Typically, churches are for church people. But there's probably like 90% of the church that don't go, the country, that don't go to church. So we were on this conference, and it was thinking basically, imagine you were starting a church for people who don't go to church, and you had a blank piece of paper. What would it look like? And through the weekend, every session looked at a different aspect of church. You think about the music. What music would you have for people? Or think of the building. What would it look like? What would the environment be? Think about the preaching and the people talking from the front. You know, what language would they use? How would they communicate? What sort of activities would you do? You know, if it was people who weren't used to church, well, how would you do and what you would do it? Now, I'd never thought about things like that before. You know, the church I grew up in, been part of that for decades, just did stuff for church people. And church people who were there had been going for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Some of the things we did hadn't changed, and everyone was quite happy about it. We were just in this kind of bubble. But actually, Jesus had brought me so much joy and life and a sense of purpose and fulfillment. And the weekend got me thinking, well, what about that 90% who don't go to church? What would need to happen for them to get a sense of Jesus and the life that he offers? How would you design something that they could understand and they could engage with? And I'd never thought about that before, but that weekend just blew my mind. And something happened in that weekend where my heart was just broken for the people who didn't know Jesus. For the people who maybe church and the way we do things was a bit inaccessible, it was a bit foreign, it didn't seem their world, it didn't seem their life. They thought, you know, church, that's for church people. It's not really for me. And my heart through that weekend was just completely wrecked for that. And actually, it just ruined my life, if I'm honest. You know, it just frustrated me. Anytime I was in church, I would just get frustrated and annoyed. And I'd think about the people who didn't understand the way that we did stuff. And my heart would just burn for people. And I would just be wrecked. I remember a church I was part of. It was an Anglican church, and so they did baptisms for babies. And often you'd get people who don't go to church, but they'd come because they wanted their child to get done. And we would probably once a month maybe, so 10, 11, 12 times a year, we'd have a baptism in our morning service. And basically what that meant was you would get this kind of family, maybe 15, 20, 30 people would turn up to get their kid done. And they would be all dressed nicely in suits and dresses. And we were in quite a narrow church. And so they'd all be sat at the front, rows got reserved for them. And so they'd all be dressed up to the nines. And then the rest of us would be in the back half of the church, just in jeans and t-shirt and that stuff. And that would happen, you know, once a month or something like that. And then that's fantastic if you're a church person. Like, we've got these people coming who don't normally come to church. But what would happen is you'd have the 10-minute baptism bit to get their baby done. And the rest of the service would just carry on as if they weren't there. We'd talk about church activities. We'd sing songs that they didn't know. And then we'd preach from the Bible just for the church people, really. And we wouldn't change anything. And I can remember one time that we were going through the book of Hebrews. Now, if you're not a Bible person, Hebrews, I think, is quite a hard book to understand and get your head around. It makes a lot of references to the Old Testament, so you need to know your Bible well to know what it's alluding to. And we were in this bit of Hebrews, and it was talking about Melchizedek, who's a character very early on in the Bible, and angels, and comparing Jesus to those things. And I was struggling to get my head around it, and I'd been at church all my life. And so I just knew that these non-church people would just be like, Melchizedek, and what's that got to do with my life? And so I just found myself so frustrated and so angry that there was these people coming to church, and maybe 10 times a year we'd get 20, 30 people. It'd be like 300 people coming to our church who'd never come to church. Fantastic opportunity, and we just ignore them. I remember after coffee one time, two of the guys, you know, in their suits, were chatting to each other, and I overheard them talking, and one said to the other, just after the church service, "Well, did you enjoy that?" And the other one replied, "You must be joking." And my heart was wrecked. And it was just a nightmare to feel that sense of frustration and that sense of anger. But that's just my heart. I know that other people, he'll wreck your heart for something else. I wonder what God has broken your heart for. Some of you will have already experienced that. Your heart will be wrecked for something. Maybe in the chat box, you just want to put, what's the cause or the situation? What's the thing that God's wrecked your heart for? You know, I know for some people it's for refugees fleeing persecution, and they land in a foreign place and their heart's just wrecked because you just want them to feel included and welcome. For other people, it's the elderly. It's people who just live on their own, and maybe when you hear they don't see anybody for a week or two, it just wrecks your heart. And for other people, it's for those with mental health problems that are just struggling the way that their mind works and their emotions, and it makes life really difficult. And your heart just goes out, and you want to provide a kind of safe and a quiet and a welcoming space for them. For other people, it's young people. Maybe it's children who are in care or in foster homes, and they don't have a family that just love and care for them. Maybe they've had a neglected background, and you just want to hug them, and you just want them to be loved and embraced and welcome. It could be all sorts of things, and I think that God wrecks our hearts for different things. What is it that he's wrecked your heart? You know, keep going, keep putting it in chat box. I'd love to hear, I'm sure other people would love to hear what God has put in your heart. And you know, we're all bothered by all these things. You know, everybody's bothered about homelessness or mental health problems, or if you're a Christian, you're bothered if people don't know Jesus. We're all bothered about all these sorts of things. But your heart is wrecked for particular things where God just breaks your heart for certain things. And if you pray this dangerous prayer where you say, "God, break my heart," and you just lay your heart open, it's a chance for the Holy Spirit to come in, and he'll deposit something of his kingdom, something of his concerns in you that'll just drive out self-centeredness. It'll drive out that desire for comfort, ease, and replace it with something else. And here's why I think you should pray this prayer, because when you pray this prayer, "God, break my heart," and the Holy Spirit comes in and breaks your heart, and you start to see situations, or your heart starts to care about things, and you know that it's God's heart that's touching you, what you discover is something quite amazing. You discover that it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. You discover, as strange as it sounds, you discover that it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. And you find that Jesus' words, where he says, you know, to lose your life to comfort and to selfishness, by doing that, you actually discover real life. You find in your experience that that's true, that it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. You know, I'm part of a church with amazing people where God has just wrecked their hearts in lots of different ways. You know, we have a family in church that God's just wrecked their heart for kids who've been neglected and who need adopting and been fostering. And so they've adopted two kids. They've adopted a little boy and a little girl. And, you know, I don't know the full situation, but obviously to be in care, they've been neglected by their birth families in all sorts of ways, and all sorts of ways that they've been affected. But like when you're in your church and you see that family, and you see these two little kids that are just loved to death, embraced by their dad and embraced by their grandparents and just loved to death. You know, it just moves so deeply. And you see the little kids running across church or running into their family's arms, and you just see them loved. You just think it's so powerful and so meaningful. And I know that adopting kids is a real challenge, but it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. We have other people in our church who've got to just wreck their heart for people with learning disabilities. And they just want them to feel welcomed and to be included. They want to provide a space for them where they can be communicated with. And we have this group called Prospects, and they meet for social activities, they meet for worship. And at the moment, they're meeting on Zoom. And I was able to observe a little bit of their meeting this week. And there was people with learning disabilities there, and people who were their carers as well, plus the helpers, and they were all together on Zoom, and you imagine all the different squares on the screen. And they were singing and doing the actions to The Blessing, a song. You might have seen The Blessing. floating around on YouTube. If you haven't, then Google it, The Blessing. It's about God's favour being upon you and his blessing being upon you. And so I got to see these people with learning disabilities and their helpers and carers, and some of them not Christian, and they were singing the words of this song and they were doing the actions of this song. And it was just so beautiful and so moving to see it. And that come because a few people in our church, their heart has been wrecked with love and concern that everyone should be included, that everybody should be welcome, and that we should find a way. That it's better to live hurting with purpose than to live without one. And from that can come all sorts of amazing things. In fact, maybe God's greatest blessings come on the other side of his greatest breakings. That as God breaks our heart, as we pray, God, break my heart, and as he wrecks our heart, then actually we find blessing on the other side of that. Because it drives our prayers and it drives our action and it causes us to sacrifice. And we find instead of having shriveled souls that we live larger lives. And that even in the midst of the frustration and the discomfort and the pain of being broken for God's things, all sorts of blessing can come in. I remember when I first arrived in Oswestry, I got asked what I thought was a really strange question. And somebody asked me this. They said, what country has God put on your heart? You know, have you got a heart for a particular country? And I never thought about that before. I was like, well, I haven't got a heart for a particular country. I didn't know what the question meant. And the person started to share their heart for Uganda. And then I found one or two other people in the church I'm part of had a heart for Uganda. And actually the church had started sponsoring a project in Uganda for the Banyoli people because they didn't have the Bible in their language, and therefore the wonderful experience people have when they read the Bible and it speaks to them and it's so powerful and moving, that there was people in Uganda, the Banyoli people, who didn't have that experience. And so a few people here in Oswestry, their heart got wrecked for that. And so they supported a project to get the Bible translated into the local language, Lunyoli language, and paid money and went to visit the project and went many times, in fact, and would invest their own time and money to support this little people group, to have the Bible translated and for them to get it. And actually, I've got it here. A few years ago, it got translated. There you can see it. It's in Lunyoli. And this is actually the Bible in their language so that they can read it. And then in 2017, some of us were able to be there for the launch of this New Testament, for the first batches to get arrived and then to get into the hands of Banyoli people, to see them reading the Bible in their own language. And there was a big celebration and a big launch. And to think that God had broken people's hearts so that the others could have it Bible in their language. And then to be there 10 years later and to see the Bible in their hands and to see them reading it and to see their joy was something quite special. When you pray, God, break my heart, and it brings frustration and it brings discomfort and it brings some pain and it brings some cost. But in the midst of all that, you find that God's blessings are on the other side of his breakings, and that it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. You know that when I was 19, I went on that conference and God wrecks my heart for those people who don't go to church and bring all sorts of frustrations. But what it means is when I teach, I try and teach in a way that even if you're not a church person, you can understand what's going on. You might not agree with it, you might not believe it, but at least you can decide for yourself. And a few years ago, we had somebody who became a Christian and they started coming to our church. And very early on, she said, my husband, he will never come to this church. You will never see him at any service. And he will never become a Christian. And then one time we had a special guest Sunday, a guest service, where people who don't go to church normally, we invite them to come. And we make it a bit more accessible than even it normally is. And she invited her husband to come, and for whatever reason, he agreed to come. He was like, yeah, okay, I'll come. And he came to that service, and I think he was quite surprised that he understood stuff, that it was quite meaningful. And from that, he decided to keep coming back to our church. This guy who never been to church, never planned to go to church. It was never going to be part of his life. And he kept coming week by week, month by month. And he did an Alpha course with us. He didn't decide to become a Christian at that Alpha course, but he kept coming to the church. And then one day I heard secondhand somebody else who wasn't a church person started coming to our church who knew this couple. And she was struggling, and she wasn't sure whether she believed it or accepted it, what we were talking about. And she spoke to this guy, and she said, well, I don't know what I think about all this. And this is what he said to her. He said, well, just keep coming. All right, just keep coming each week. And that's what I did. And eventually it just made sense. And eventually I just made the decision to become a Christian. And he gave her that advice, just keep coming. And I heard that secondhand. And I'd never knew that he'd become a Christian. He'd made that decision to follow Jesus. And you know when I heard that? When I heard about this guy who doesn't normally go to church, and he'd started to go into church, and he found it a welcoming place, and over time his heart had opened up to Jesus, and eventually he'd made that decision to commit his life to Jesus. You know, when I heard that, it made it all worthwhile. I thought back to that conference when I was 19. I thought of all the frustration. I thought about how God had made my heart broken. I thought about all the discomfort, and I thought about all the anger and the irritation that I felt. And it just made it all worthwhile. Because it's better to hurt with purpose than to live without one. And maybe as you pray that prayer this week, God, break my heart. And as the Holy Spirit comes and breaks your heart for the things of his, as you discover that his greatest blessings are on the other side of his breakings, may you just live a full life, a full life, full of meaning and full of purpose. And may you follow him wherever he leads you, wherever it takes you, the breaking of your heart, to serve the poor, the disadvantaged, to care for those in need. Whatever activity it takes from you, may you be obedient to whatever he asks you to do. May you think that dangerous prayer was one of the best decisions that you ever made, one of the best prayers that you ever prayed.
Justice, Savior to all, came to rescue the weak and the poor, chose to serve and not to be served. Jesus, you have called us, freely we receive now, freely we will give. We must go, live to feed the hungry, stand beside the broken. We must go, stepping forward, keep us from singing, move us into action. We must go to act justly every day, love and mercy in every way, walking humbly before you are God. You have shown us what you require, freely we receive now, freely we will give. We must go, live to feed the hungry, stand beside the broken. We must go, stepping forward, keep us from sin, move us into action. We must go. Fill us up, send us out. Fill us up, send us out. Fill us up, send us out, Lord. Fill us up and send us out. Fill us up, send us out. Fill us up, send us out, Lord. We must go, live to feed the hungry, stand beside the broken. We must go, stepping forward, keep us from singing, move us into action. We must go. must go. Live to feed the hungry, stand beside the broken. We must go. Stepping forward, keep us from the singing, move us into action. We must go.
And we got lots of ways for you to connect with us, Hope Church, right through the week. And we just try and do that to encourage you. We try on a Monday and a Tuesday to release little excerpts, maybe 3-4 minutes from today's message. And that's just to help you share that with other people. People who might not want to listen to a whole message, but give them a couple of minutes and that might draw them in. And it's an easy way to invite people to be church and to be part of what we're doing. So you'll see those coming out on Monday and Tuesday on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. So like those and share those. And then each Wednesday, we do live worship on our Facebook stream. So make sure you keep out for that, an eye out for that, 6:30 on a Wednesday evening. And Thursday each week, we release 5 minutes of hope, just a little short reflection from one of the leaders of Hope Church, just to inspire you and encourage you on a Thursday. And if you haven't heard Emma's brilliant one from last week, then go on our YouTube channel and have a look at that. So subscribe to our YouTube, check us out on Facebook, and we're on Instagram as well. Just search Hope Church Oswestry on any of those things. Lots of resources, materials just to inspire you and to guide you throughout the week. Got some brilliant news on Friday. Hope Church Oswestry, we got awarded a £27,000 grant towards our building move, so we're really excited by that. And God's been so good to us financially, continues to bless us. We had another £6,000 gift in this week, so we're just so grateful for God and his generosity towards us. And if you want to be part of that, you can give into the work that we do and the ministry and the things that we do in Oswestry and around the world. You can go to our website, hopechurchoswestry.org.uk/give, and you can do a one-off donation or set up a regular donation there. And you can also give by text. And so if you don't give us regularly and you want to give, you can do that by texting to number 785. You either text HCO10 or HCO20, depending on whether you want to give £10 or £20. And that would really appreciated to be part of what we're doing. Everyone's open to invest in the work that we're doing, and we're just really grateful for all your support and all your help. We love having the kids in as part of what we're doing each week, and one of the things that our kids Zoom groups have been doing is they've been learning a memory verse, and to help them memorize it, they've been encouraged to do actions and teach their family to it. And I thought it'd be brilliant for you just to see one of our kids and what they've been doing. So this is Harry Sampson sharing his memory verse from this week, complete with actions. Hope you enjoy this.
Zoom group, we have been learning about being determined and God giving us what we need to keep going. Our memory verses: let us not become tired of doing good when at the right time we will gather a good crop if we don't give up. Galatians chapter 6 verse 9.
How sweet the sound. So that's a sneak preview of what we're going to do over the next few weeks. And we're going to look at some of the classic great hymns of Christian history and look at these great weighty words and see what they might have to speak to us about our current situation and our current life. And we're going to look at a different hymn each week. And so that's going to be really quite moving and quite inspirational, I think. So please join us for that. And that's it. That's our service done today. Thanks for everyone who's took part. And don't forget to connect with us during the week in the various things that we do. You'll be really, really welcome. And just pray God blesses you as you go into this week, praying that prayer. God, break my heart. May you get closer to God. May you get a sense of his presence and his priorities for the world that we live in. And may your soul grow larger. And may you bring meaning and purpose to those around you. God bless you all. We look forward to connecting with you next Sunday in our live stream again. Thank you and goodbye.